I don't know. What's world coming to, eh? It's a bad job when someone's telling you can't have a drink down pub after your tea without having another tea to go with it.
If I had to choose out of school or lockdown, I'd probably choose school.
I found I was feeling an overwhelming sense of guilt that I wasn't at work and not doing much.
That doom and gloom the country was in, and the world was, and to some extent still is in, I suppose.
And the very next day, Graham, and that's her husband, you know, he was ringing to tell me she'd passed away, God rest her soul.
My garden wraps herself around.
I have missed being able to see my friends and do the things I would normally do.
For me, lockdown allowed me to start to sort out my troubled head.
Guided home learning.
It's 3 cheers for Zoom.
So you see, COVID, you in 2020 can just go and do one.
At the start of lockdown, it was amazing. Endless freedom, endless trips to the fridge, and endless little sister time. Well, maybe not that. Then came the blow. Guided home learning. AKA constant teacher surveillance, and not to mention constant Wi-Fi issues. Anyway, yesterday, I went to the local Tesco's since my sister invited my mum into baking a chocolate cake. After a good half an hour outside in the rain, I finally got inside. Unnervingly, on my way round, the shelves were bare. A lone box of Cheerios dominated the dry goods aisle. No pasta, no rice, no flour. Oh dear, someone wasn't happy.
Zoom. Ah, yes, Zoom. Possibly the most interesting find of the COVID lockdown. Like many people, I'd never heard of Zoom before March 2020, and yet it seems to have done more for connecting people than anything else. Most people these days have got an internet connection, and therefore it's enabled families and interest groups and businesses of all sorts to keep in touch so easily. With Hallam 89 Theatre Club, I am not sure what we have done to keep rehearsals for the railway children going without Zoom. The members' continued enthusiasm and commitment has been most pleasing. Also, quizzes, play readings and other activities have given the group a continued buoyancy. No one has fallen by the wayside. The Sheffield U3A has been doing weekly Zoom lectures, which have covered a wide range of interesting topics, and the numbers have exceeded well over 100 on most occasions. Individual U3A groups have also managed to keep going using Zoom to keep in touch. Sadly, my Bus Pass Explorers group has not been able to venture out since February. Our walking group used to meet each quarter at the Ranmore Inn to work out the themes and leaders for the next 3 months. But now we use Zoom each Thursday evening to walk out next week's group of 6 walks. Although recently it's gone down to groups of 2. For my Canadian uncle's 102nd birthday in September, all the Canadian family and the UK branch, 20 of us in all, were able to Zoom across the ocean and spend a happy time chatting away. Every October since October 1977, a group of us from West Midlands College has enjoyed a weekend reunion, but not so, of course, this year. However, Zoom came to the rescue, and on the 24th of October, we had a virtual reunion with a full turnout. And, of course, none of us looked a day older. On the Jeremy Vine show, they were discussing things that had gone wrong with Zoom. And apparently, Prime Minister's question time, Boris's link got cut off. So the other MPs in the House were making all sorts of interesting comments like the revenge of Dominic Cummings. Also, people were phoning in to say that when they were having business meetings or whatever, suddenly somebody appeared in the background in their underpants or something like that. And one chap, suddenly realising, dashed out of the room, not realising the door was open, and bashed straight into the door, almost knocking himself out. But Zoom has meant that across the world, people have been able to keep all sorts of activities going, although apparently it's not easy for choirs to sing together due to differing broadband speeds. So, it's 3 cheers for Zoom!
My name is Frankie and I'm here to speak to you as what it was like as a child during COVID-19. One thing that kept me entertained was an app called TikTok. I would do videos to entertain people whilst they were on the app too. I had to do homeschooling whilst in lockdown. I really wanted to go back to school, but now luckily I get the education properly in school. Luckily, most of my friends are in my class, so it's not all bad. During lockdown, I spent most of my time online playing games, watching videos and talking to my friends. This summer, I went to Devon because we couldn't go abroad. I had lots of fun learning how to bodyboard. This year has been a very difficult year to previous years. I have been lucky because I have lots of things to keep me entertained. But I have missed being able to see my friends and do the things I would normally do because of restrictions. I couldn't see my grandparents, and that was difficult, not just for my family, but for many families in the world. Just a few weeks ago, my year group got sent home to isolate for 2 weeks because one child had got the virus. It was like being in lockdown again. This shows how much the virus is spreading in Sheffield.
Hi, my name's Tom, and I've recently started writing poetry, a few short poems. I've brought 2 with me for this evening. The first is about the garden. I wrote it at the height of late spring. It's actually called Infidelity. My garden wraps herself around me, caresses me with perfumed colour. She whispers that she loves me as much as I love her. Seduced willingly, naturally I choose not to know how, in night's warm, damp darkness, she opens herself to fox and badger. With sniffles and snorts entangled undergrowth, she betrays me, as we betray the swifts who can no longer find the skies to bring us hope, to make us human.
What? What did you say? Am I still on phone? No, I'm not. I've had enough of phone for now. Yeah, you ring Vera if you want to. I'm out here. I'm having a cigarette. I'm having a ciggy break. Oh, don't start. You ring Vera. I'll try again when you finish talking to her. That'll give me half an hour or so. At least half an hour. I've been on the end of that phone for God knows how long. Oh. Took me ages to get out, except engage tone. And then when you do get through, all you hear is a blooming recorded message. Due to the unusually high volume of calls we are experiencing this morning, you are placed in a queue. Please continue to hold. One of our operatives will be with you shortly. Shortly. How short? Shortly. And then all you get is some crappy classical music. Hey, that wouldn't be so bad, but you're still trying to remember what title of it is when they interrupt it in middle again with another message. You're currently number 21 in the queue. Please be advised that you can also contact us via our website, www. something or other. Well, I could contact you if I got the internet and a computer, but as it is, our Emily keeps saying, she keeps saying, Dad, it's 21st century. For God's sake, get yourself a laptop and the internet. I can't be doing with all that stuff, my son. You're missing out on so much, she says. Well, so what? As long as I can watch a bit of telly and get down Miners Arms for a pint or two. Not that you can do that present, of course. I don't know. What's world coming to, eh? It's a bad job when someone's telling you can't have a drink down pub after your tea without having another tea to go with it. Sorry, they don't call it tea now, do they? It's a substantial meal or something. Well, world's gone balmy if you ask me. I'm only trying to ring this trace and track thing, whatever it's called. Oh dear. She's got the idea that because I've got a bit of a cough, like, I must have this COVID thing. It's onset of cold weather, that's all. Keep telling her. Always gets to me chest a bit. You know what happened last year? She made such a fuss about me cough, I ended up going to doctors. And who said, well, there's nothing wrong with you, Mr. Jones, except you smoke too much. Would you like me to prescribe you something to help you stop smoking? Listen, I says, why should I want to stop doing something that I enjoy, eh? Well, perhaps, he says, because if you go on doing as you are doing, it's likely to shorten your life by a considerable number of years. Listen, I says, my old man smoked 40 Capstan double strength a day until the day he died. No filter tips on them are out. And he lived till he were 102. That'll do for me. 102. Man, you are losing a bit by then, but even so, 102, eh? Oh. Anyway, this year I've got virus, according to her. She's even got our Emily at it. She rang last week, Emily did. Dad, you're not really taking this serious, she says. If you won't listen to Mum, will you just listen to me for a bit? Hey, so to cut a long story short, I says, go on then. I'll phone them up, make an appointment, see where I get. I tell you what, I hope I get more sense from them than my mate Dennis did. They phoned him to tell him as how he'd been in contact with someone with disease like. Wouldn't say who. He's got one of these fancy phones with apps on and that. I warned him when he got it. I says to him, what does thou want one of them flash things for? They're storing up trouble for this and Dennis, so mate, I says. I'd chuck it in bin, me sen. Anyway, turns out all they could offer him were an appointment in Bolton. Bolton! He says, well, you can stuff that. He says, I'm not driving all that way to end up in one of the places with highest rates in country. He told him, he says, you can sod that for a game of soldiers for a start. If I ain't got it when I arrive, I'll have it when I leave. Well, he were right, weren't he, eh? Bolton. Turns out he'd driven past the arena the day before and he said there were about 5 cars in car park and loads of staff dressed in gear doing Sweet Fanny Adams. But they said they couldn't give an appointment there for some reason. Oh dear, you couldn't make it up, could you? Anyhow, Dennis reckons now it's all a plot by Chinese government. And he rode up. What's that, love? What? You finished on phone to Vera? Already? Right. That were quick. Ain't she feeling well? What? Caught it? Bloody hell, she's not, has she? Aye, I'll give her another go then. All right. See if I get any further this time, eh?
She's still not answering. She usually does in her lunch hour. Don't know if she's been really busy recently, our Emily. She's a teacher, you know. Have I told you that before? Done ever so well for herself. She was promoted to deputy head at the start of last year. Did I say? It's a lot of responsibility though, isn't it, having a full-time job like that, when you've got 3 kids at home as well. How she coped when lockdown was on, I'll never know. Because with the lockdown regulations and that, we couldn't get over to give her hand, you see. She does ever so well though, she really does. Wilf's ever so proud of her, you know. Well, we both are, though I don't think you'll ever get Wilf to admit it. But then, that's Wilf all over, isn't it? You know what he's like. Anyway, Emily always says how much she enjoys her job, that I don't know how she's coped since this pandemic started. She told me last week she'd had over 1,000 emails since the start of term from the, what are they called now? DFS? Oh, no, that's the shop that sells sofas, I think. No, the DFE, I think it is. Over 1,000, all with instructions about COVID. It's ridiculous, isn't it? I don't know how she copes, I really don't. And do you know, sometimes she's only just finished putting in place what one email's told her to do, when she gets another one telling her to do something different. Mind you, that's this government all over, isn't it? Do you know that Wilf went and voted for them last election? Did I tell you that? Yes, it came as a shock to me too, I can tell you. Oh, Wilf, I said, how could you? You of all people, someone who'd never hear a word said against the union when you were working. How could you vote for someone like Boris? Can't you see that the only thing that man cares about is himself? That's what I said to him, I did. And do you know what Will said? Do you? He said, it's a long time since I saw any politician who cared a fig for people like us living round here. So I thought, I might as well vote for someone who looks like they might stand you a pint if you bump into them down the pub. Emily was furious with him. Dad, she says, can't you see what's happening in schools? We've no money, we're short of staff, we're short of resources, and we're having to find ways of feeding kids who come to school half-starved. Oh, she was mad with him. I've never seen her so cross, and they used to be so close, you know. She used to think the world of her dad. Thought the world of him, she did. Anyway, I think they've patched things up again a bit now, though, thank goodness. And when he rang up last week to say he'd tested positive, well, it really upset her, you know, it really did. But at least, you know, he had the good grace to thank her for nagging at him till he rang to get a test. You see, he'll listen to her. He won't take it from me, never has. I said to her, please will you say something to your dad? You know what he's like. It'll be you he listens to if he takes notice of anyone. Good job she did too, otherwise who knows where we'd be now. I could tell when he talked to her on Monday she was close to tears. When I rang to say that we'd had to telephone for an ambulance and he'd been taken to hospital, I think she'd have been sobbing her eyes out, but the kids were around and she wouldn't want to upset them, you see. She takes after her dad like that. So that's why I'm trying to get hold of her now, to tell her he's much better, and they're saying he might be able to come home soon. To tell the truth, I think they're wanting to get rid of him as soon as they can. He's always been a real misery when he's ill, even if it's only a bad cold or something. And to be honest, I'll be glad to have him back home, even if it does mean him moping round the house grumbling all the time. You know, I have missed having him around and under my feet this last week. We've not often been separated in 42 years of marriage, you know. And with things the way they are, you don't get to see them very much when they're in hospital. You see, it's only a few days since they were muttering about intensive care, and that really panicked me, I can tell you. And it was only the end of the week before, you know, that I'd heard about Vera going into intensive care. And the very next day, Graham, and that's her husband, you know, he was ringing to tell me she'd passed away, God rest her soul. Well, what a shock that was. Did I say we'd been friends since we were at school together? Oh, I better get that. Probably Emily ringing back. It'll be good to have some news to tell her, some good news at last.
"2020 can do one as far as I'm concerned. As usual, on the annual New Year's Eve gathering, we sang Auld Lang Syne and gave everyone a hug and wished each other a Happy New Year. And that was probably the last time that most of us hugged or was happy or even optimistic. I can't really remember much about January or February. They passed in a blur of work, gigs, invigilation, rehearsals at the theatre, etc. Then those background murmurings about the virus began, and that made us feel a bit uneasy. Like something was in the air, but like most things, it would probably come to very little and soon pass without much of a fuss. But they gradually became more ominous. I'm close to home. No, I thought, hey, this sort of thing doesn't happen these days. It's not the Great Plague, is it? Anyway, COVID-19 went viral, literally and figuratively. Lockdown was announced, and I must admit initially I panicked because overnight all my work disappeared and all my husband's work stopped. After a few gloomy, not seeing the point of getting out of bed days, I woke one morning and thought, come on, you can do this. You've always wanted more time to gut the flotsam of the decades and clear it out of the house. My husband had been wishing for ages to have time to clear the garden, and you can't say the weather wasn't conducive to it. A lot of the garden got done, though not so much of the inside as I'd hoped, but it was just too nice to be indoors, wasn't it? My youngest daughter had made it home to be in lockdown with us just in time, and my other daughter lived nearby but couldn't visit. But we played many games and did many quizzes together as a family, using good old Skype. And so amongst all this, things trundled along and life was quite bearable, except for one thing. I couldn't see my mum. She was in a care home and I wasn't allowed to visit. I think Mum, who was gradually descending down the road into dementia, couldn't really grasp what was happening. But I sent her letters with news and photos in the hope a befogged brain wouldn't forget us. Then the call came. Mum wasn't well. Probably a cold, a touch of tonsillitis, maybe, as she was running a fever, as they said. She was put on antibiotics to be on the safe side. And the relief when they rang the next day and said the fever seemed to be down and she was brighter. However, the next day brought bad news. She had taken a turn for the worse. She was finding it hard to breathe. She suffered regularly with chest infections due to a heavy smoking habit in her pre-care home days, so this wasn't unusual in itself. But the manager's next sentence chilled me to the core. I really think under the circumstances we can allow you to come and be with her, because things aren't looking good, I'm sorry to say. She was laid there seemingly catatonic, eyes open, seeming but not seeming to acknowledge my presence. Her chest working hard and sounding like a broken, wheezing steam engine. The paramedics were with her and said they could take her to hospital, but they didn't think it was going to make much difference. And if they did, I couldn't be with her. I'm so sorry, said the team leader. We've already had one case of COVID. And the doctor feels very strongly that your mum has it too. And with the chest problems, I'm afraid she's going down fast. Leave her be, I said. She wouldn't want to go to hospital, she. I knew she hated the place and I wouldn't want to spend her last few hours there. I sat in my full PPE at the other side of the room, unable to touch her, but hoping she knew I was there, talking to her and reminiscing and telling her that I loved her. And as the dawn light started to creep through the curtain, I realised what she was waiting for. Permission. I said, "It's okay, Mum. We're all okay. You did a grand job, but you know, Dad's been on his own for a long time now and he's looking down and waiting for you." And with that, she took one last gasp of precious air, and the bubbling, wheezing, broken machine that was her chest stopped moving. It was Easter Sunday, and that seemed right in some strange way after my all-night vigil. So you see, COVID, you and 2020 can just go and do one.
The second poem I only wrote this week in reaction to the good news about vaccination. It's called In Pandemic Voice. In pandemic voice, Earth, betrayed, forsaken, yells loud and clear, "Enough! Enough!" Shall we hear her? Or do we prefer the misplaced comfort of beguiling jabs that inoculate against the will to act?
Well, 2020 started off normal enough for me. I had a job with absolutely no pressure at all. I was directing what I thought was going to be an amazing production with the drama group that I'm with. And I was happy with it myself. Well, here I am, some 11 months later, with everything changed. I now have a new job with significantly more money, but trust me, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. You know, the pressure that's put onto me, well, it's making me really stressed and miserable, unable at times to want to do anything like even getting out of bed in the morning. There's no more proper drama, although we still meet each week on Zoom, but it's still not the same. I've lost my snooker, going out to the football with my dad, or something as simple as just being with friends. You know, throughout the whole summer, whilst not working at all, well, my mental well-being took a right battering. Sure, I was getting paid for not working, but that isn't the point. I mean, it sounds great, but what am I meant to do on my days? Just watch Judge Judy or something? I mean, I'm someone who wants to and needs something to keep me going. The thing is, though, I didn't even realise what was happening until about 2 months ago. I mean, I suppose it was from the isolation all that time. I mean, being on my own since March. Just nothing but awful news every day that another few hundred people had died of this terrible virus. and that doom and gloom the country was in, and the world was, and to some extent still is in, I suppose. I wasn't even able to go and visit my parents. You see, they're both over 75 and in that vulnerable category. Sure, I could have been in their bubble at the time, but I couldn't do it. Do you know how bad I would feel if I was a carrier of this disease and not even know about it and passed it on to them, and then something terrible would have happened? The guilt would have hurt me too much. I'd never have forgiven myself, and I don't think I could live with that kind of guilt. Anyway, I suppose this depression slowly came up over the months. I began to realise what was happening to me. I'd seen it before, and then suddenly, BANG! It hits you in the head like a car. I mean, you get these dark thoughts and negative feelings about myself. And other people saw it in me too, but I'm not sure if they knew what it was. I mean, sure, you get people that say it's just a phase that you're going through. Everyone's feeling the same at the moment. You'll be fine. How do they know that I'll be fine? Not even I know if I'm going to be fine. I mean, how the hell do they know what I'm feeling? They'd reply with something like, well, I don't, but I can imagine what you're going through. You know, that phrase has always tickled me. I never understood why people would say that they can imagine what I'm going through. Because there's no way could people tell what I'm going through unless they've experienced it themselves. I mean, I was lucky. I did something about it. I spoke up. I wasn't going to suffer in silence and become another statistic. I reached out to family, friends, my work and the GP. Because it was a new job. I was scared to tell work. But they were so supportive and gave me the time off and put me in touch with counselling service, allowing me that outlet to talk to someone and talk my feelings and my thoughts through, who doesn't know me from Adam, and I know that they won't judge me. I also have an amazing family who I'm able to be very open with, and a circle of friends that I can always rely on. You know, after being so hesitant to even see my parents for all those months, I've even taken that big step of bubbling with them, and I've moved in with them until I'm fit up here again to live on my own. And I'm getting there, don't get me wrong, I'm getting there, but it ain't a quick fix. I guess what I'm trying to say in this video is, don't suffer in silence. Speak up and reach out to someone, whether it be family, friends or colleagues, your teacher, your GP, or even on the telephone to one of these numerous services that they have. Get the help that you deserve. Fortunately, depression is no longer one of those taboo subjects as it was a few years ago. In 2018, 6,154 people ended their own life in Great Britain alone. That's more than 16 a day. And it's estimated that 10 to 25 times more of those people have attempted to end their lives. And out of that, 80 to 90% of those people that have attempted it because of mental health. So, please, don't suffer in silence. Reach out and talk to someone, even if it's me.
As lockdown began, everything was strange. I work in retail, or rather, I work in travel money in a department store. Under normal circumstances, we'd start getting busy in March, with people going away for the Easter holidays. Of course, this year, things are different. Hardly anyone is travelling abroad, so our department was very quiet. Actually, the last few days before lockdown, the whole store was quiet, apart from the food hall. Before lockdown, and after returning from furlough, our department, the Bureau, aka Travel Money, has been left empty, with us at the Bureau staff only going in when we get a customer. Makes sense, really. So my job has changed. I'm now mainly working on menswear, which is located next to the Bureau, so it's handy for me to go to the Bureau if you get a customer for that department. The Bureau is still very quiet. Some days we have no customers, but the average is about 4 or 5. Some customers have the uncanny ability of arriving whilst I'm on a break. I've actually lost count of the number of times it's happened. One day, I'd had no customers at all, so I went on my break, and as soon as I sat down, before I'd even got my lunch out of my bag, the phone rang and they said I had a customer. Typical. But before lockdown, it was very strange. It was so eerily quiet. I'd never known the store to be so quiet, even on a snowy day. And that's saying something. The store actually shut all the till banks, except for the ground floor, because it was so quiet. The cafe was shut due to government guidelines, yet customers still complained. We even had customers asking that if we could make them a coffee in our staff room because they were tired and needed a drink. With the till banks being shut, we only had 2 members of staff on the top floor. The rest went to help on the food hall. We were looking for things to do. I've never known the store be so tidy. Everything was folded up neatly, everything was in size order, and we had size pips on all the hangers. We mostly spent the day constantly wiping down surfaces over and over again all day. The day after lockdown was announced, all the staff came to work as normal, even though we were aware clothing and home departments would be closed. When I started my shift, I collected the Bureau phone and spoke to a manager. I said that I assumed the Bureau would be closed, and she said that was correct. I ended up working on the front doors, greeting customers coming in and out, running a one-in, one-out policy. The manager quickly realised we had more staff than we needed, and they were asking if we'd be willing to take time off unpaid. I said I was happy to do this, due to living with someone who is high risk. So at first I was down to take a week's unpaid leave. After a couple of days, my manager rang and said I would be paid for that week. 2 days before I was due to return, my manager rang and said that they thought I would benefit from the furlough scheme because of my circumstances. This was at the end of March. Every few weeks I received a phone call informing me that furlough was being extended. First it was the end of April, then the end of July, and eventually the end of October. Each time I was told that I could be called back to work at any time. At first thought I'd be back in mid-April, that it'll all be normal by then. How wrong could I be? As it turned out, I returned to work near the end of September. During the time I was on furlough, I did some major decluttering in my room, a job I'd been putting off for a long time. I got rid of so much junk and got everything organised, and even moved some furniture about. My dad had made me a new unit for my DVDs and other bits and bobs. In fact, he actually started work on it just before the lockdown hit, so in a way, it happened at the right time, as I was already doing some spring cleaning. My room looked the best it's looked in years. I'm sure plenty of people got those "I'll do that one day" jobs done during lockdown. And with the weather being so lovely, I spent a lot of time in the garden, reading a book and doing puzzles like Sudoku, as I wanted to keep my brain active. I tried to find something productive to do most days, as I found I was feeling an overwhelming sense of guilt that I wasn't at work and not doing much. I had to keep reminding myself that it wasn't my fault. It was also hard not seeing family and friends. We talked on the phone and sometimes on Zoom, but it's not the same as actually seeing them. I've still not seen my brother since February. I managed to see both my sisters, separately, between the 2 lockdowns. Socially distanced, of course. That's another thing with lockdown. We are also keen to make sure that everyone is aware that if you meet up with anyone, that it was at socially distance, to emphasise that we weren't breaking any rules. The rules are so confusing, constantly changing. Does anyone know what we really can and can't do? All I know that I can definitely do is to drive to Barnard Castle to check my eyesight. Wait, what do you mean I can't actually do that?
Don't tell anybody, but I quite enjoyed lockdown. What is there not to enjoy about being forced to do nothing and spend more time with your closest family and pets? Although I can imagine some people not seeing it quite this way. Some people have lost someone close to them without being able to see them one last time. Others have been completely isolated on their own. It would have taken my teenage self about 3 days of lockdown before I started contemplating matricide. I've always been something of a sociophobe. My wife says miserable git. So did not greatly miss meeting others. I only ever go to the pub before or after the theatre, so although I miss theatrical pursuits, the closing of these drinking establishments did not trouble me. Eventually, all my activities resumed via Zoom, but thankfully without the touchy-feely bits. The internet meant that I could satisfy my shopping habit from the comfort of my home. Luckily, we never reached a point where outdoor exercise was prescribed, and I was able to continue to run, cycle, walk and weightlift. To excess, as always. For me, lockdown allowed me to start to sort out my troubled head, ably assisted by the drugs, which, by the way, Richard Ashcroft did work. For the last 4 years, when I took the King's Shilling, or at least the Principal's Redundancy payout, closely followed by drawing down the gold-plated teacher's pension, I felt guilty about not going out to work. The fact that nobody was going out during lockdown greatly helped to absolve this guilt. The indefinite timescale of lockdown allowed me, or perhaps even forced me, to try out new home-based activities. I thus found out that I could do DIY and creative activities, resulting in some new garden furniture, wall art for the playroom, some self-designed t-shirts and plans for our own Christmas cards. Not only did these activities fill up my time, but also improve my self-esteem, going some way to counteract my mother always telling people that Stephen can't do anything with his hands. This indefinite timescale also made me start living my life by enjoying the day and not keep yearning for, or often dreading, some event in the future. Not only does such thinking seem to speed the passage of time, but I'm frequently disappointed when some longed-for event doesn't happen in the way I had idealised. At the very least, it often rains, and I always seem to forget that others will encroach on my fantasy world. Throughout the first 3 months of lockdown, I completed a mental health journal. This allowed me to fully reflect on my life and why my mood was so low. The first thing I realised was how lucky I am, financially, intellectually and emotionally, although the financial side and my relationship with my wife may not weather my intimate spending sprees. This did, though, raise the question of why I should feel so depressed at times when I am so lucky. The mind, and particularly mine, really is a strange place. The only thing I've really missed is the theatre. As lockdown started, the musical I was about to appear in at the Lyceum was cancelled, thus depriving me of the hat-trick of appearances on the 3 famous Sheffield theatre stages. I don't really know if I will ever have this opportunity again, especially as the choreographer has now seen me dance. As I finish this, we're about to move into the second wave lockdown. Outside it's raining and blowing a gale. I've just fallen over in the mud while walking and isolating friend's dog. Sheffield United are in the bottom 3. Oh, and the dishwasher and kitchen lights don't work after I flooded the bathroom last week. Despite all of this, I'm optimistic that I can weather the storm. I have the stairs to decorate and, of course, the ruined kitchen. I've turned my shed into a dry, if cold, hideaway, and have plenty of design projects to be getting on with. I've also started writing a second book and have a wealth of winter recipes to try out. Finally, as a bonus, if Christmas is cancelled, I for once will not be accused of being Scrooge.
In lockdown, I had to work at home. Like, the only good thing about it is I got to watch Netflix on my iPad and just chill. But the bad thing was, I couldn't see my friends. I could go on walks for exercise. If I saw my friends, I could say hi. I had to sit on that chair every single day, except the weekends. I just slept in all day. If I had to choose out of school or lockdown, I'd probably choose school.